get out now. The State Department just ordered all Americans to leave the embassy in Venezuela. What it means for political chaos ravaging the country.
I just don't believe in it. They wanted me to impeach President Bush for the Iraq War. I didn't believe in it then. I don't believe in it now. It divides the country.
And Democrats divided again, this time over impeaching the president, why far-left freshmen are going against their leader. And campus craziness, the college under fire for teaching students that Make America Great Again is white supremacy. Fox and Friends First starts right now.
Reflects the deteriorating situation in Venezuela, as well as the conclusion that the presence of U.S. diplomatic staff at the embassy has,
like Havana, continues to provide political cover to Maduro regime while pressuring countries to disregard the democratic legitimacy of the interim president Guaido.
As for opposition leader Juan Guaido, he was on exclusively with Trish Regan, talking about his fight and warning about the perils of socialism to an American left that seems enamored with it.
I invite everyone to see what's going on in Venezuela, the amount of displaced persons in our country, and the drama that it's become, the day-to-day living of seeking out food, water, or simply having power.
Guaido has said he will invoke a constitutional provision allowing the Venezuelan Congress to authorize foreign military operations to intervene. That last line right there, Heather, is one that we need to watch with all eyes.
Yeah. All right. Well, it's just been steadily increasing. Thank you so much. Appreciate it. Well, back at home, memorial services began today for a sheriff's deputy murdered in Illinois. Deputy Jacob Keltner was gunned down while trying to serve an arrest warrant at a Rockford hotel. Accused killer Floyd Brown appeared in court for the first time. A judge denied him bond, claiming that he's a flight risk. Brown could face the death penalty for murder charges. Deputy Keltner spent 13 years on the force. He leaves behind a wife and 2 sons. Well, some lawmakers want all Boeing 737 MAX 8 planes grounded in the U.S. after that model crashed in Ethiopia, killing 157 people, including 8 Americans. It is the second deadliest crash involving a 737 MAX 8 in months. Now, Senator Dianne Feinstein writing to the FAA, quote, continuing to fly an airplane that has been involved in 2 fatal crashes within just 6 months presents an unnecessary, potentially life-threatening risk to the traveling public. The FAA warns against comparing the crashes and says the planes are still, quote, airworthy. Several international airlines have grounded those planes. Well, President Trump unveiling a record $4.7 trillion budget proposal for 2020, and Democrats already voicing their opposition. Senator Patrick Leahy saying, quote, this is not a serious proposal, adding it is, quote, dead on arrival and divorced from reality. And the budget request includes $8.6 billion for 722 miles of the border wall and $72 million to fund 100 new immigration judges. The administration says that the proposal also includes strategic cuts.
From day one, this president has put forward spending reductions in his very first budget that were the most in history of any president in history. We're going to both grow the economy over 10 years, and we're going to continue to put forward spending reductions.
Yeah, about $2.7 trillion over a decade. The budget also includes a vast welfare overhaul requiring Americans 18 to 65 years old to work at least 20 hours to be eligible for benefits and aid. And much more on all this coming up a little bit later. Well, the budget for the special counsel's Russia probe is covered through September. That's according to Reuters. Robert Mueller's nearly 2-year investigation will continue to be financed by the Treasury Department. And there has been speculation that the investigation is almost over and that it will be delivered to the Attorney General soon. We keep hearing that. Mueller's office reported spending $9 million during the last fiscal year. But he has some more money to continue. Well, how about this? I am not for impeachment. House Speaker Nancy Pelosi says that she is against trying to throw President Trump out of office, a proclamation that could alienate some fellow Democrats. Griff Jenkins joins us now from Washington with the latest reaction. Good morning, Griff.
Good morning, Heather. Yes, Speaker Pelosi is trying to send a clear message to members of her own party, trying to throw the brakes on a rush to impeach. In an interview with the Washington Post, she says this, quote, impeachment is so divisive to the country that unless there's something so compelling and overwhelming and bipartisan, I don't think we should go down that path because it divides the country and he's just not worth it. Pelosi's comments reflecting a sentiment held among Democratic leadership that moving forward with impeachment could backfire with election consequences if it's not a bipartisan effort. But that hasn't silenced some of the more outspoken and controversial freshman Democrats. Representative Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez, responding to Pelosi in comments to the Washington Examiner, says, quote, I wouldn't say she's completely concrete. She's always demonstrated leadership that takes all kinds of factors into account. Should the Mueller report drop and we see something, I wouldn't count anything out. And last week on the Hill, Representative Rashida Tlaib saying she intends to introduce articles of impeachment by the end of March.
If we don't hold impeachment proceedings today, start them today and hold him accountable to following the United States Constitution, think about that. This is not going to be the last CEO that runs for President of the United States. This is not going to be the last person that tries to get away with this.
That spat still playing out late yesterday. Heather, House Majority Leader Steny Hoyer agreeing with Pelosi, telling Fox News off camera, we've got 62 new Democrat members, not 3. The White House has not commented. And just finally, a quick history lesson. Bill Clinton rose 7 approval rating points by the end of his impeachment trial. The Democrats gained 5 House seats during the 98 midterms.
Interesting. And I like your polite word for all of it, the spat that continues. All right. Thank you so much, Griff. Well, Democrats, fresh off an anti-Semitism controversy, find themselves split once again. Congressman Dan Crenshaw says that the view from the other side of the aisle doesn't look too good for the left.
It's extremely divisive. The country does not like that. You know, a lot of Democrats ran on bringing the country together and ending dysfunction in Washington. And what are they doing? They're bringing dysfunction to Washington. And while I agree with Nancy Pelosi, the reality is right now that representatives like Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez are driving the narrative of their party. And that's really problematic. And I actually feel bad for a lot of my Democratic colleagues who really don't agree with her. But the reality is that she's driving the narrative. A lot of the presidential candidates coming out are really repeating a lot of the talking points. We see this in endorsement of the Green New Deal. They're repeating the same talking points as Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez. And that's really problematic for the Democrats. The American people really don't want to see it.
Well, lawmakers like Ocasio-Cortez could be coming for Pelosi sooner rather than later. Pelosi made a deal with the party after winning the House, earning support to be Speaker in exchange for proposed term limits on leadership. So we'll see how that plays out. Democrat Stacey Abrams not ruling out a 2020 White House run. Abrams tweeting in part, 20 years ago, I never thought I'd be ready to run for president of the United States before 2028. But life comes at you fast. And now 2020 is definitely on the table. This, as fellow Democrat Beto O'Rourke fuels 2020 speculation by announcing his first trip to Iowa. He's expected to campaign for Democratic Senate candidate Eric Giddens. Abrams and O'Rourke would join a crowded field of 2020 hopefuls if they run. Keeps on building. Well, the DNC announcing that it will hold its 2020 convention, by the way, in Milwaukee, the Wisconsin city, winning out over finalists Houston and Miami. Committee Chair Tom Perez saying that Milwaukee embodies the party's focus on the working class. Apart from Chicago, Democrats have not held a national convention in the Midwest since 1916. Well, Frank Sinatra called New York the top of the heap, and soon you could go to the tippy top at 1,100 feet. It's called The Edge. I watched this under construction as it was built. It is at 30 Hudson Yards. It will be the tallest observation deck in the Western Hemisphere and the 5th tallest in the world. The deck's glass floor, giving visitors a bird's eye view of the Big Apple. It is slated to open early next year, and it looks really cool, at least from the ground. I don't know about up there, though. Well, the time now is about 11 minutes after the top of the hour. President Trump proposing some sweeping changes to entitlement programs like food stamps. Will there be enough support in Congress to get it passed? We will ask Congressman James Comer live up next. And Senator Elizabeth Warren fighting with Facebook while the social media giant is backtracking after deleting her campaign ads. More than 500 criminals, including MS-13 members, rounded up in a massive operation. Interpol sweeping through 8 Latin American countries. More than 850 guns, 38,000 bullets, 20 grenades, and fake police and military uniforms also found. Look at that. Well, here at home, ICE making the biggest cocaine bust in 25 years. The Fed seizing $77 million worth of the drug disguised as fruit. The nearly 3,200 pounds of cocaine found inside a shipping container in New Jersey that was coming from Colombia. So yet another reason that we need ICE. Well, President Trump requesting an additional $8.6 billion to build the border wall in his 2020 budget plan. This amid his ongoing national emergency declaration that is facing opposition from both sides of the aisle. So will this new proposal earn any support? Republican Congressman James Comer joins me now live with more. Thank you for joining us.
Thank you for having me.
So as we begin our discussion, let's bring up where we can break down a little bit more about the border wall budget. The additional $8.6 billion for the wall, that's $5 billion from Congress, $3.6 billion from the military, and that would complete, we're told, more than 722 miles of the wall, all part of that $4.7 trillion budget plan. So what do you think are the chances of this passing?
Well, it's got overwhelming support among House Republicans. We passed a bill last Congress when the Republicans were in the majority to fund the border wall. There are only a handful of Republicans that are against it this time. There were, ironically, more last time, but they were defeated in their re-elections, which is a pretty good sign that the Republican base strongly supports the wall, and they support President Trump's efforts to secure the border. So, we've got Republican support, and I think we've got some Democrat support. There are a lot of Democrats that are in swing districts that won elections that would certainly be considered toss-up races moving forward. They realize that this liberal agenda that Pelosi and these radical new Democrats that have embraced socialism, among other things, are pushing is not a winner for their reelection. So I think there's a better chance than you would think for this bill to pass the House.
When you hear things like the first two stories that we did right before we brought you on, more than 500 criminals, including MS-13 members, rounded up in this massive operation through Interpol. And then here at home, ICE making the biggest cocaine bust in 25 years. You would think that Democrats and those Republicans that don't agree with declaring the national emergency would get on board.
You would think that. I'm on the Oversight Committee. We just heard from the Office of National Drug Control Policy Director Carroll last week about the drug epidemic in America. The drugs are clearly coming from the border. They're coming from all parts of Mexico, crossing the border illegally, where we have no wall, no barrier to prevent this. Democrats want to spend more money on rehab and all sorts of drug programs, but we can put a major stop to this program by impeding the border. This is what the American people want. I don't know what more it's going to take. The president is clearly drawing a line in the sand on this issue. I strongly support his efforts. If Congress will not fund the money for the border wall, I strongly support the president's efforts to declare a national emergency, because it is a national emergency. We have a terrible drug problem, and the majority of these drugs are clearly coming from Mexico.
Yeah, and let's talk about this other part of this proposed budget, though. The President Trump, he's proposing some vast work for benefit requirements. Do you think that he can get enough support to pass this major, what is it, an entitlement reform? And we can bring this up as you talk about it.
No, the taxpayers strongly support this. I'm on the Agriculture Committee as well. We tried to pass legislation last Congress when we passed the Farm Bill to put work requirements on able-bodied welfare recipients to require them to work 20 hours a week. What American wouldn't support that? But apparently the Democrats don't support that. They view that as racist. They view that as cruel. And it's just another slap in the face of working Americans. This is why we're going to see more and more working, tax-paying Americans continue to turn their backs on the Democrat Party in Washington. But hopefully this will support. I strongly support the president. I know the Republican minority in the House supports work requirements on welfare recipients.
Yeah, well, it's just the beginning. Now the negotiation begins. begins. And I've got to say, I was impressed. The acting White House budget chief said that the cuts involved in all this would amount to $2.7 trillion over a decade. And that's the largest proposed budget cut in the nation's history. So we'll see what happens.
Well, that's great. I mean, we have a spending problem in Washington, D.C.
Yeah.
I applaud the president and Budget Director Mulvaney for taking a stand and trying to get spending under control. We cannot continue to spend more money than we take in.
You can't. I can't do it, you know, so government shouldn't be able to do it either. Thank you, Congressman. Appreciate your time.
Thank you.
Well, the time now is about 20 minutes after the top of the hour. And is Make America Great Again an example of white supremacy? Well, some students are actually being taught that at college. Carly Shimkus here with reaction to the campus craziness. Says that she is against impeaching President Trump. The admission sparking outrage and support, right, Carly? So a lot of people had something to say about this, of course.
That's right. That's right. So House Speaker Nancy Pelosi said the president isn't worth dividing the country even further through divisive impeachment proceedings. Not everybody on board with that, though. Billionaire activist Tom Steyer, who's been running a campaign to impeach the president, responded to Pelosi with this statement saying, is holding the president accountable for his crimes and cover-ups worth it? Is doing what's right worth it? Or shall America just stop fighting for our principles and do what's politically convenient? So over on social media, reaction is pretty much mixed. Dane says, thank you, Nancy Pelosi, for taking impeachment off the table until further investigation is completed. I love leaders who are calculated, not noisemakers. Ben on Twitter says she has bigger problems dealing with the new freshman. It's so interesting, the backlash over this one, because she simply just said, let's wait to talk about impeachment proceedings until further evidence comes out. That should be something that everybody should agree with.
And a lot of conspiracy theorists saying they don't believe her.
Oh,
so we'll see, that she's up to something.
She's up to something.
Let's talk about Reed College, though. They're saying that the Make America Great Again is white supremacy.
All right. So Reed College, this is a college in Portland, Oregon. They're facing backlash for showing student RAs this graph, and they call the Make America Great Again phrase a covert example of white supremacy, along with things like housing discrimination and fearing people of color. So a spokesperson for the college responded to backlash saying this: it's provocation, and that was the intention, was to present the RAs with something provocative and spur a conversation about the difference between implicit bias versus explicit bias. Whew, that's a lot of words. Elizabeth on Twitter says, this is nuts, but promoting socialism and abolition of the Electoral College and prevention of free speech is okay. And Wes on Twitter says, universities who do this nonsense are really the racists. So the college says that this was actually a lesson in teaching tolerance, not intolerance. I would love to have been a part of that class to really see what was going on.
Are they going to continue it?
Well, I mean, they already showed it to the RAs. Yeah. The graph is out there, and it seems like they are defending themselves. So, all right. I mean, take that however you want.
All right.
Yeah.
Thanks so much, Carly.
Appreciate it. Thanks a lot.
Well, the time now is about 26 minutes after the top of the hour, and old foes together again. White House Press Secretary Sarah Sanders clashing with Jim Acosta.
The president has been clear on what his position is, certainly what his support is for the people and the community of Israel.
You're saying something that's just patently untrue.
And they were just getting warmed up. And President Trump says Democrats are turning into an anti-Israel party. But Chuck Schumer says the president is the one dividing the country. David Rubin, the former mayor of Shiloh, Israel. Welcome back. Half past the top of the hour. A look at our headlines for you so far this morning. The U.S.'s tree, and he's just not worth it. Well, a Coast Guard officer accused of stockpiling weapons and writing a hit list pleads not guilty. Do you remember Christopher Hassan? Well, he was arrested last month after investigators found several firearms and 1,000 rounds of ammunition in his Maryland apartment. Prosecutors call him a domestic terrorist and say he had a hit list targeting journalists and Democrats. If convicted, he could face up to 31 years in prison. And nearly 750 immigrants arrested trying to cross the border illegally in Arizona. Border agents provided medical attention to 137 of them. The majority of them taken into custody are from Central America. Family apprehensions, by the way, at the Yuma sector, they're up 230% from this time last year. And President Trump doubling down on why his 2020 congressional budget includes a sweeping overhaul to welfare programs. The president telling Breitbart News, quote, I don't want to have anyone coming in that's on welfare. I don't like the idea of people coming in and going on welfare for 50 years. And that's what they want to be able to do, and it's no good. The proposal includes requirements for Americans 18 to 65 years old to work at least 20 hours to be eligible for benefits and aid. And White House Press Secretary Sarah Sanders sparring with CNN's Jim Acosta over anti-Semitic allegations. The back and forth stemming from President Trump recently saying that Democrats are anti-Israel and anti-Jewish.
The president has been clear on what his position is, certainly what his support is for the people and the community of Israel.
You're saying something that's just patently untrue. I mean, obviously
Stating their policy positions
but
is not
Democrats
patently
don't.
untrue.
But Democrats don't hate Jewish people. It's just silly.
I think they should call out their members by name, and we've made that clear. I don't have anything further. April?
President, you know.
Sorry, Jim.
Well, Sanders pointing out that Democrats have failed to address the anti-Semitic remarks from Ilhan Omar. President Trump is taking on Democrats after they refuse to condemn Congresswoman Omar by name for perceived anti-Semitic remarks.
I thought that vote was a disgrace, and so does everybody else if you get an honest answer. The Democrats have become an anti-Israel party. They've become an anti-Jewish party.
But Chuck Schumer is pushing back, saying the president is just trying to divide the country. Here now to weigh in is author of Trump and the Jews and the former mayor of Shiloh, Israel, David Rubin. Thank you so much for joining us. We certainly appreciate having you with us this morning.
Well, thank you. It's good to be with you.
So I want to bring up what Chuck Schumer had to say. He said that this is a new divisive low. His comments show the president is only interested in playing the politics of division and not in fighting anti-Semitism. Mr. President, you have redefined chutzpah. So who's right, the president or Chuck Schumer?
Well, I think that Chuck Schumer should be ashamed of himself to be speaking like this. He's trying to divert the issue. The issue is that there was a blatantly anti-Semitic member of Congress in the Democrat Party. There's actually more than one, but we'll focus on Ilhan Omar, who made very, very harsh anti-Semitic statements. Anti-Israel, anti-Semitic, it covers all the grounds. And the Democrat Party is fleeing for cover. They're not dealing with the issue.
Why do you think this is happening? And what, in terms of her comments, concerns you most?
Well, she's using all of the old classic anti-Semitic statements, the charges of dual loyalty, that she would only accuse Israelis, only accuse Jews of being guilty of. She would never accuse a Guatemalan immigrant or a Puerto Rican immigrant or a Mexican immigrant or a Muslim immigrant from any other country of being loyal to a foreign country. Only Jewish Americans would be charged with that by her. And that is the old classic charge of dual loyalty. It is vicious. It is anti-Semitic. And there have been others as well. I think that it's time for the leadership of the Democratic Party, Chuck Schumer, Nancy Pelosi, to take a stand on this instead of just coming up with this ridiculous generic resolution in Congress saying that they're against hate.
You know,
the issue is the anti-Semitism.
And you know, wherever you speak, you started this, Shiloh Israel Defense Fund, when your 3-year-old son was injured in a terror attack. Your son was in critical condition as a result of that. Do you think that this is an issue with these folks not knowing and understanding the history of the region, or not caring?
Well, it's probably a combination of the two. Look, first of all, my 3-year-old son and I were wounded in a terrorist attack carried out by members of the Palestinian Authority who were supposed to be negotiating peace with. Look, Ilhan Omar knows what she's talking about. She knows the history. She knows that the Jewish people are the indigenous people here in the land of Israel. But because she is filled with this jihadist Islamic hatred, that she can't get over it. And no matter what she does, she can apologize. You know, she can be condemned by the members of her own party. But when it comes down to it, she is going to be making more anti-Semitic statements. This isn't the end of it. I warn you, I warn everyone right now, we're going to be hearing from her again with more anti-Semitic statements.
All right.
It's a big problem for the Democratic Party if they don't stand up to it.
Well, hopefully they are listening to you right now. David, thank you so much for joining us. We appreciate it.
You're welcome, and thank you.
Well, the time now is about 20 fighting to keep their jobs this morning after the city's mayor threatens to lay hundreds of them off. This after voters passed a referendum that pays them equally to police. And Marty Langton is the president of the Houston Professional Firefighters Association, and he joins me now with more on this. Thank you so much for joining us this morning.
Thank you for having me, Heather.
So this would be about 400 Houston firefighters that would be laid off. That's about, what, 10% of the department's personnel. Explain to us what is happening and why this would be occurring.
Well, you know, it's to break it down is probably most simplest. The simplest form for your viewers is you have a mayor that does not respect the will of the voters, does not respect the basic right of democracy in which to petition your government. We had a referendum that was run through the city of Houston, the citizens of Houston, November of last year, which said that, listen, we need to prioritize taxpayer funds. We need to prioritize the taxes we pay in the city of Houston, and public safety should be number one, and you should equally value the service and sacrifice of brave Houston firefighters, just as the city does brave Houston police officers.
So in order for some members to get a pay raise, others lose their job.
Well, that's the mayor's contention. So the mayor has continued to play this vindictive role that Houston firefighters, he didn't get his way, and now Houston firefighters have to pay. So that is what this mayor has kind of stood upon, is that if you don't do what I tell you, then I'm going to make you pay for it, and I'm going to cut off and lay off public safety employees and put citizens' lives at risk.
So do you think people knew what they were actually voting for, or was the mayor intentionally misleading?
Well, I think that the citizens knew exactly what they were voting for. The mayor spent over $1 million to try to defeat this measure because it wasn't his idea. It wasn't what he wanted. And so what the mayor refused to do was acknowledge that Houston firefighters who have received only a 3% pay raise, 3% total, since 2011, versus our counterparts, and deservingly so. Our brave brothers and sisters at the Houston Police Department had received over a 37% pay raise. So, you know, the mayor continues to spend money on pet projects. He spends taxpayer funds on contracts that aren't approved through city council. And what he doesn't do is value the sacrifice and service of the brave women and men of the Houston Fire Department who put their lives on the line every day.
So what's the lesson for other people and the ripple effect across the country, or potential ripple effect?
Well, the ripple effect is that this vote was passed by a 60-40 margin, and this mayor has done nothing but litigate. And so what it tells everybody across the nation is that your vote doesn't matter. And this isn't an attack just on the fire department. This is an attack on democracy, on the citizens of Houston who went out and who voted. And it was a 300,000 vote in favor of this referendum to give firefighters equal pay. And what this mayor did unilaterally was then spend taxpayer funds to say that I'm smarter than 300,000 voters, and then sued to invalidate what the voters of Houston clearly said they want, which is equal pay for our brave first responders.
Yeah, that is just crazy. Thank you so much, Marty, for bringing this to our attention, and let us know what happens moving forward.
Will do. Thank you so much for having me.
Thank you. Well, the time now is about 15 minutes until the top of the hour, and it is make or break for the Brexit deal. Theresa May has one more shot to get Parliament on board or brace for chaos. With a break in 2 weeks. We are live in London with why you need to care about today's blockbuster vote. Plus,